Hi, I'm Dr. Clare Steffen, and I'm here today with Keith Bailey Martin. We're going to share the vision of message music. How are you doing today, Keith?
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for having me
Yeah,
on
I'm
your.
so excited for us to share this, huh?
Yes, this is a very big move for us to bring message music and our partnership. This is just a great. This is a good thing. I'm excited.
Yep, me too. Okay. Oops. And so I wanted to give you a minute to talk about Two Safe Soul Records and radio and the vision of that and how you started it all.
Wow. Okay. Well, Two Safe Souls Records in a minute is is a continued vision, I believe, of my mother. She was somewhat responsible of working and being around Philadelphia International. She was a writer and she wrote music and that. I grew up in music and I decided to continue her legacy with Two Safe Souls Records. Two, the number two, Save Souls Records came from the idea of myself and my son both being interested in ministry. So we want to continue the legacy so that there's all this wonderful music that I heard from her death and bring in new and exciting music. And it's branching off to, you would not believe, to all of the different things that are growing from this, Dr. Claire. To Save Souls Records Radio is now a venue that we utilize to expose and get some of our vision, some of our dreams, and some great, great music out.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful vision too, and I know you're signing on all sorts of new musicians. And, as we talked about, there's a lot of different genres. And so, it's just interesting that we found each other. It's not just synchronicity. I don't think it's even by accident. You're on one part of the country and I'm on the other coast of the country. And yet we found each other and share the same idea that we're in need of healing and that message music is a way to bring that to people, not only across the United States, but globally.
Yes, yes. I'm excited about the marriage, the union between
Yeah.
us. This is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and the other thing that impressed me about your organization is that not only do you bring together singers and songwriters and musicians, but you also have preachers and ministers and people like myself that are, healers and teachers and community leaders to spread the word, or the mission of message music.
Oh, yes. We know I that was kind of well, there's no accidents, as you say, but it was kind of an accident. The people that we're working with, some wonderful folks, Spirit to Spirit, Michael and Denny are outstanding. They're not really gospel music. I started as gospel, and then we started having artists who were actually preachers. They're fivefold card holding members who preach the gospel. They're prophetess, they're apostles, they're evangelists, and then we have doctors who, like yourself, who are bringing healing, and we're using this music ministry or this music medium to express healing.
Yeah, and I'm also excited now that, I've met, not face to face, but again, connected cross country with Denny and Michael Jenkins. The hope is that they will be utilizing some of my lyrics and that we'll work collaboratively to create some music.
Yes, that would be a good thing. I've heard your music. I'm excited about your work. Once I saw your work, I was like, you got to have her. You got to have her. Not only does she have credibility, but she's got a wonderful spirit, is what I'm telling my team. Like, look, we just got to have Dr. Claire on the team because she brings such a element. She has the element that we haven't had because we want to minister. We're saying spirit to spirit is actually a ministry. We use music, but we're working in the streets and bringing in the homeless and doing different things like that. And sometimes we need to be able to check ourselves and have someone who can keep us in line. And there you are.
You know what? We all need that for each other. And because I believe in self-healing and the power of our brains to heal, I cross-trained. I have a second doctorate in naturopathy, which is basically natural healing, and it has its roots in ministry, actually. And so everything I do comes from a wellness perspective. I'm certified as a natural health professional and a master herbalist, because I also believe in earth medicine, and I got cross-trained as a coach. So I'm trying to do life coaching, wellness coaching, and business coaching. And so nowadays I put in a lot of effort to training other people to coach and, to bring that wellness perspective. So,
Yes, I'm excited about the college that
well, thank you. Yeah.
I want to attend this college.
Well, great. We'll talk about that in a minute too, but I know you have some affiliations through Two Safe Soul Records with Sony, and these are just a couple of the organizations that you connect to, but tell us a minute about that.
Yes, when I started, I had I'm in Baltimore, so I had everybody in Baltimore raps. Wherever you go, you're at the 7-Eleven, wherever you go, there are people rapping and singing. And I started out with a couple of artists who were rapping, and they were doing message music. I mean, like, it wasn't so clean that you could take it into church, but the idea and the concept was great. So I took this music to a gentleman here in Baltimore who just wants to make a statement about music in Baltimore. Michael Diamond, God bless Michael Diamond. I got to shout him out from Man Ray Records. We have a partnership, and we started. He was just the studio guy. He had a studio. We brought these artists there, and because of our relationship, he purchased the system and the processes that we use to access the orchard and by access Sony by way of the orchard. And there's just a great combination. It's been a nice journey, the folks that we've been connecting with.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and when I think about rap and hip hop music, it's really kind of street poetry put to music.
Yes.
And it reflects what's happening, socially. And that's always been my interest in music, is a message for social change and healing and growth. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm originally from Chicago.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and so I've seen,
that. Okay.
yeah, I've seen a lot of, street musicians. Also, when I lived in the Bay Area in San Francisco, there's just a wonderful, array of street musicians available there. But, my mother too was also a musician, and so I grew up with music. She played in the church, and she played organ, and she sang, and she played piano, and she played violin, and
Wow.
her parents were from Ireland, and so she grew up playing fiddle music with her brothers as well. And so I have a love of Celtic music and church music, and especially I like folk music that brings that social message that we're talking about, and folk rock, and just the wide array.
Well, just to key in on what you were saying, there are poetry to music. When my mother was doing poetry, I have a wonderful collection that she left me as she passed away with a cancerous brain tumor. I inherited all of her music, her catalog, and I've been attempting to move it into different venues and produce some of it. But it's funny you would say poetry to music, because I used to, as a child, go to her shows or her concerts that she was doing locally and be the background guy, plugging the wires, making the lights work, and just kind of a roadie, to some wonderful events that she put on. And
it's wonderful to have that heritage, and that exposure, because I think what it does, it gives you permission to express.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so when you grow up with that, that's a lot of freedom that many people don't have, and I think that's partly what draws people to musicians, is that ability to feel something that they otherwise maybe would not be able to express.
Doctor, being that I'm glad you're around, because you can help me with this. Being a creative puts you in a whole different world.
Yes. That's so true. Our brains work a little different, you know. And, you know, I've come to appreciate also the people that are a little bit more what we would, you know, sometimes in the past refer to as left brain. But, you know, they're more detail oriented. They're much more, you know, the tech type. But, you know, we have to have a balance in our brains, and we need to be able to access both sides of our brains. And I've come to appreciate that the tech brain has also a lot of creativity, you know, and so again, there's another marriage of sorts, if you will, you know, yeah, communication between the different hemispheres of the brain. So this information here is about some of the genres. You've talked a little bit about this already, that you sign on your label at 2 Safe Soul Records. And so you've expanded from gospel, you know, into Christian and hip hop and Christian rap, and I love the jazz and, you know, soul and R&B kind of background as well.
You know what happened with that? I'm glad you put that out there, because you know, I didn't want to pigeonhole myself. I mean, the idea or the concept for me and my son to both have this was my son then to want to help folks heal, and we thought that Christianity or the principles found in Christianity were suitable for us. Now, I know there are folks who are in different journeys in different moves, but for us, that's what it was. And then at the same time, we began to find ourselves being pigeonholed, because when you think of gospel music, you kind of think of quartets and that, you know, well, I don't really want to listen to that because I heard that Sunday and my mom used to have this going all over the house and we didn't want to hear that, you know, and it was kind of like a punishment. So when you say 2 Saved Souls Records, I thought that we might begin to be pigeonholing ourselves. So we changed. And then the artists with their creativity had the ability to reach folks that I had no access to.
Absolutely. You know, and I think when you look at the roots of jazz and R&B, and, you know, for me, like I said, coming up in Chicago, you know, there was that whole transformation of people from down south moving into the cities, you know, like Chicago, in order to find work and bringing music with them and the influence there. And in the time I grew up, since Chicago's so close to Detroit, we were highly influenced by Motown music, you know, and so you just, yeah, get this blending. But the other thing, you know, being kind of a cosmopolitan city, Chicago had a lot of places you could go to pick up these different kinds of music. So I could head up north and hear some jazz, you know, or I could just go a mile or two, you know, west of that area of the city, and I could go hear some folk rock, you know, or I could head to the ends of the city limits and go into Indiana and get some rockabilly or, you know, bluegrass or whatever I might desire to hear. I could find it, you know, and so I too believe that there is messages in all kinds of music, and that for myself, you know, when I write music, I write the lyrics first most of the time, and I receive it sort of like you would receive a poem. It just comes to me, and then I either put it to music myself or I work with a musician to put it to music. And so I've simply called my music intuitive healing music, because I receive it. It's done intuitively. I don't write notation. I just hear it, and so, you know, and then I feel it, and so that's how it gets created.
And I love it. I mean, I was when I was young, I used to listen to a lot of jazz because my mother was a poet, and she would write things that were metaphorical and you know, almost fairy tale-ish, and I had the ability to transcend, to go from hurting and pain to this wonderful place. And I'm still in the ghetto, but in my mind, this place is just so fabulous, you know. And I like that about music. It
transports you. Yeah.
Transports you somewhere else. You know, when
Yeah.
I have a rough day, I just come to my little space and I hear music, and everything is all right all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I don't think it really matters where you're from, what your background is. You know, we all at times need to be transported to someplace different through our imaginations and through being able to connect to a different feeling or a different level of consciousness.
Yes.
And music does that for us. And it does it in such a way that we can go into that internal journey and do it for, with ourselves, or we can connect to other people and share that journey. So it's very, very powerful in terms of its ability to heal.
And you can make social moves with music. I mean, when you and I were coming up, I remember times or times in the media or in the news, there were people were calling them hippies because the music and the movement was love, peace, love, and that, and the music was different, but it was something that group of people related to at that time, that particular time. So it can also create causes and movements.
Yeah, or it can reflect the cause or the movement. And, at that time, a lot of the music was acoustical, and you really had to be an excellent musician to play that kind of music because there wasn't a lot of technology to hide behind. And you couldn't create the sounds, like you can through synthesized music today. And so it was a very different time. And again, I think there was a lot about that, that was, as you say, a reflection of the social change that we needed to see. I was, as a child, very influenced by the music of Bob Dylan. They call him the song poet, for good reason. But to me, that was the beginning of that journey on seeing how music could reflect social change. So this is just some contact information for you, Keith. There may be other places, but Facebook seems to be a good way to find you. And you have your own personal page and then pages for Two Safe Soul Records and radio, right?
Oh, absolutely. You could just Google Two Safe Soul Records or Keith Martin. And, it was a time I would walk around and go, I don't carry business cards because generally all I do with my business cards is write your phone number. But now you can just Google Keith Martin or Two Safe Souls Records. And I was proud, so to say, that I maintain or own about 11 of those pages. You can find me almost anywhere.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. That is the beauty of the internet these days. And I'll just talk real briefly here about the college you mentioned earlier. I founded Coaching Choice College in order to be able to bring a different level of healing, than what I do through my psychological work. People aren't always looking for a diagnosis, and they're not always looking for treatment per se. And coaching is a different way to go to connect to people. And it really allows me to bring that wellness model and to focus on things like social and emotional intelligence. Through the college, I've created a whole model of choice and helping people develop choice and at different levels of thinking and functioning where they're at. And kind of, again, there's movement. And helping people identify what are the best approaches, in decision making when choices need to be made. So I created the college and an affiliate program called CE for Coaches, which is a continuing education program for folks after they get certified as a coach. And there's a board that oversees this and approves all of my coursework. The other thing I created, and also is I think a shared vision you and I have, I created a site called familyofchoice.org. And the idea is that there's an organization here for people that need family support that may not have a family of origin that they go to for any number of reasons. Maybe because of trauma and loss, maybe because they're living in a different part of the country, different part of the world, and they don't have that immediate support available to them. Maybe they're a veteran, who has gone through some transitions and having a hard time, readjusting, coming back into this culture. I've worked inside the VA. I've worked inside Indian Health. There's all kinds of people that have a lot of history of trauma, that are disenfranchised. And you mentioned the homeless, and so this is just another way to reach out to people and create the supportive family by choice.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I believe this is a natural fit for us because, that my mind, so you have a wonderful way of explaining it and putting it in words, but my mind sees it, I can see the work, whereas you can speak the work. And we've created the She Conference, and that's exactly what we're doing. These uh, artists that we're working with who happen to be, they're talent and gifted preachers or teachers, and they're coaches and ministers, and we give them a platform to not only present their talent but share their gift in helping others with this She Conference to promote self-awareness, healing, and empowerment. Well, we need to be trained in order to reach the masses and bring it all together. So I'm trying to still picture how our marriage, Dr. Clare and Keith
Mm-hmm.
Walker, how we're going to move that into an effective organization.
Yeah, and I think there's plenty of room for us to talk about that and create, some different trainings. And by now, I have trained a lot of coaches all across the country and even some in Europe, and so I see some things happening down the future where we could bring speakers, on different topics that would be beneficial. The other thing that you and I have talked about in terms of Two Safe Soul Records, in some ways you view your people that you sign on your label as part of a family. And, that's the other place where I see this connection in terms of family support.
Yes,
Definitely.
If you ask any of them, they'll tell you, my wife probably tells you more than anybody that if you join Keith or you get involved with Safe Souls Records, that's family. I mean,
yeah,
we've met heart to heart. And that's
yeah, and sometimes I think, musicians can have a rough road, because financially our culture loves the music, but they don't always support them, like in other situations where people have the kind of traditional job where they, make money enough to be secure. Musicians don't always have that. So this is just sort of the direction, too, that we're talking about for music, message music as a universal genre. We've already talked about it has multifaceted roots, but I also see there's other places in which this genre fits. People that are on the indie label, for example, whose music, is kind of now having to fit someplace in a separate category, would also fit in message music. And so it's a fusion of all of these different genres, and I think your label is a good place for people to fit that in.
Oh, yes, I believe so. We've had, like you said, we have jazz artists, we have artists who are rapping, we have artists who are southern bluegrass,
Yeah.
so, and we're all receptive to each other and responsible to each other. That's, a part of family,
Yeah.
we just
Well,
accept
you
each
mentioned
other for who
something
we are.
earlier that I wanted to talk again about for a minute, the history of social change through music. And, I mentioned my time growing up in Chicago. And, I always think back when I was just becoming a teenager, we had the National Guard called into the city. And the city was shut down, because there was rioting going on. And even as young as I was, I had a job at that point in time, and my dad had to come pick me up because we had to be off the streets, And it was just a time when there was so much happening, and I think sometimes all of these movements are so important to our history. But then when I think of it scientifically, there's a term called homeostasis. And it's sort of like a rubber band when you stretch it. People expand their thinking and their level of consciousness. But then when you let it go, it reverts back to its original shape.
Yes.
And you see that in social movements. We're seeing it happening now where there's all of these advancements and changes in social programs that were created. Some of them being removed because of social funding is removed when there's different changes in across time. And when that happens, some of the support is removed for people of different needs. And so, I think, again, this is another way to reach out and support people, that it doesn't have to always come from of government funding. There's so many other ways that we can create support and help one another. And, you know, when there's times of social discord and disharmony, music can play a major role in joining people together and promoting change.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I smiled when you said the riots. I wasn't trying to be facetious, but I'm here in Baltimore. It couldn't have been but 2 years when I was standing in the street with my pastor and our church and supporters or whatever. And, you know, we were, as you said, on curfew. We had to be in the house by 10 o'clock, be off the streets because the National Guard was called in. Well, I grew up in that with the Black Panthers and all these different movements. I remember, and I'm probably dating myself, but I remember busing and how that was so, you know, such a big deal.
Yes, I remember it too, Keith, you know, and of course we had Black Panther, you know, in Chicago, and people don't always, of different cultures, don't always recognize the value of some of the things those folks brought to the community, breakfast programs for children who didn't have breakfast, you know, and a lot of other support behind the scenes that, you know, didn't get publicized. So,
exactly. But, you know, as a family, we get to give and share, you know, not only the hardships in the journey, but the accolades and the comfort. You know, when I'm talking about music and you don't understand, I know I got a place I can go and folks understand, you know, what it is that I'm going
that
through.
you're experiencing. Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, and so I'm thinking of it this way, and I know you kind of share the same vision as me, that message music has different types and purposes. We can find it in religious, spiritual, or, you know, make that universal connection through that type of music. But basically any genre of all the types we've talked about here so far that increase, social awareness or consciousness or raise, you know, empowerment. And then that last category is where I think my music fits in, that intuitive healing, the kind that induces meditation, transcendence, or brings us to a more mindful state.
Yes, I so enjoy that. The fact that, you know, now we can branch over and do some different things. And we use music. You know, it's funny how music is used. It's a tool, actually. Like if you look at productions or movies, now, you always know when the villain's about to show up because the music goes dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, that's so true.
That was this victorious part of it, you know. So yes, I can see that. I can see the healing piece. You know, when you were talking about different stages of riots and that, you can soothe the music down and calm the music. Things begin to change.
Yeah, you know, I have worked with so many people in different settings across my career now, but even with adolescents that are into heavy metal music, you know, there's a time and a place for that. Like you say, it may not be for every environment, but for kids who are feeling a lot of rage at that point in time, that music is a release. And it's a valve that lets out some of that rage that if they didn't have that outlet, it might go in a wrong place.
Oh,
and I'm not,
absolutely.
Yeah, and so I'm not saying you want to keep them in that music vein at that high intensity level forever, you know, and maybe through some interventions, you know, with coaching or religious support, spiritual support, you know, therapy, counseling, and many other tools, you know, we can bring them to a different place where we calm that brain down that's so agitated.
I see it in both hip hop and you know, punk or rave. They were having raves at one point. Was a big, and I see exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, but so a lot of anger gets expressed, you know.
We want to bridge the gap, and that's a very hard thing to do because, you know, it's changed now. We're so smart that we forgot to do little things like take out the trash or cut the grass. You know, we're too busy. Somebody else does that for us, you know.
Yeah.
And music can kind of put the brakes on a little bit.
Right, and help us slow down. That's a good thing. And so just briefly want to talk a little bit about the emotional expression that we feel and how we respond to music on an emotional level. Music has learned associations in memory. It brings us back, as we're talking about here today, to different place and time, and it connects us on a brain level to the place in our brain that's called the limbic region, where emotions are housed. And that gets activated when we hear music, you know.
I see.
Yeah, and then, we have expectations about where the music's going to go. There's certain patterns or structures of music that we anticipate the sound. And then also music induces emotions that evoke the expression of movement. And that those movements, are sometimes dance movements, or the feelings that are connected to it, which are universal. And that music also activates our sympathetic nervous system, which arouses us, that we're listening, we're intent, we're feeling. And like we talked about earlier, sometimes we can also use it to soothe. And so these two top mechanisms are based on learning, and the two bottom ones explain the universality of the patterns of music, that no matter what culture we're talking about, the experience is shared.
Wow. Yes, I agree. Totally.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff when you think about it. And that's just, the icing on the cake, so to speak. There's, as I said, universal emotions that are experienced. We know this now scientifically, no matter what group of people we're talking about, what country we're talking about. We all experience anger, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, surprise, and the facial expressions that go with these emotions can be detected universally.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And we
Yeah.
use music in each of those. I know that there's a song in the back of my mind for each one of those.
Each one of those emotions, that's right,
Exactly.
And there's another gentleman, Robert Plutchik, who said, well, it's got to be more expansive than that. It's not just those 6 emotions, because there is an array of emotions that feed off of those, that are different levels of intensity and frequency. And so now we understand that, those universal emotions are much more expansive. And again, I think you could find a song for just about any of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the power of message music is its universality. It communicates healing. Like you and I were talking about, it brings you to a place where you can feel that internal connection, but also externally we connect to one another.
Yeah.
You can have a wide range of emotional responses to it. And I always think about it happening in the context of culture. I mean, look at it. Just this morning, you and I were talking about the time we grew up in and the messages within the culture, about at that point in time, the riots around segregation, the riots around the changes that were occurring with women and within the family.
Yes.
Things were happening in the Black community or other communities of folks of color, And so the beauty of music, it creates this time capsule that we can return to, and we can re-experience it, and we can reconnect to it, and we can look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, in most cases, though, I found that the music that we tend to go back to
Mm-hmm.
good. I mean, it wasn't, a bad thing in most cases. I know you can remember a time. Yeah, I remember when the Beatles came and they called this the British invasion.
Yeah.
To me, it was wonderful. I totally enjoyed it. But there were people in my circle of influence that, thought that this was not a good thing. And I just absolutely loved it.
Well, and
Because
maybe
great in
depending
that
on,
time.
where you're at, maybe it represented in some ways white middle class, that music. But over time, as the Beatles grew and expanded in different levels of consciousness, I think, again, it was one of those things that transcended different cultures within our culture. And people found ways to relate and connect to those messages.
And here's the one that's key in my mind. All we need is love. And I just keep
Perfect.
remembering that.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. I love it. And so music unites us. We use it in ritual, we use it in ceremony, different life events, social happenings. It transports us, as we've said, to different level of consciousness. We find personal meaning in it, helps us resolve loss, traumatic events. You know, people have candle lighting ceremonies when there's traumatic events and losses in a community, and they usually raise their voices in song, you know.
Yeah.
It allows us just to be more flexible, more adaptive, and crosses all kinds of social boundaries. And it really brings us together as one.
Wow. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I think, and as do you, I'm sure now, you know, music communicates all kinds of feelings, and it allows us to communicate our struggles and the need for change. It crosses racial, cultural, social barriers. It uplifts. It transcends the conditions that oppress us. And it, you know, can bring us together to commit to social change. And it's a way to really share emotions and connect to one another.
Yes. And we're
Yeah.
so in need of that. I think we've gotten. My mother used to say, "You're too smart for your own britches." Now we've done outgrown ourselves. Now we need to get back to some basic stuff, I think.
Well, I think because the, you know, culture that we're in universally right now moves so fast, we
Yeah.
do need at times to slow things down, you know, to be able to reassess what is of value, what matters, you know, and how we can heal each other, you know. And so music can help be that conduit to it, because it allows us to express that range of emotions, and what's occurring, you know, at the time can be expressed through music. And as we said, we've got memory and perception related to that experience. And it can help us also share the same vision and be able to support one another without judgment or without criticism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the thing, you know, people are looking for, no matter what age we're talking about, of course, it's more commonly thought of during adolescence that we look for acceptance, but all of us want to belong. You know, we need to have a place where we feel we matter, and that we have a purpose, and that what we do matters, has meaning.
Absolutely.
You know, and without that sense of purpose or meaning, people tend to get depressed, or they tend to feel highly anxious. And because this, you know, time we're in, things move so quickly. You could be on top of the world one instant, and then, you know, make a wrong move, and the whole world knows.
Oh,
And so
absolutely.
you can be, you know, yeah, things change quickly.
Yeah.
So anyway, it is important to find meaning and purpose in life, because it's a source of happiness.
Absolutely. I agree totally. And that's one thing, we like to do. We want you to be aware. You know, is Two Safe Souls Records going to make like this monumental, uh, world class change? Maybe not, but we can change one person at a time.
Right.
Well, I
Yeah,
make
and got to be realistic in our expectations, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, the other thing is, you know, whether I'm working as a psychologist or as a life coach, or I'm also certified as a drug and alcohol counselor. And boy, there's so much addiction out there in the world for so many different substances, you know.
Yeah.
But my music is written with intentionality and focused on bringing about healing and wellness. And all of the work I do really is to move away from a sickness model of treating people, to bring them to a place of wellness and self-healing and empowerment. And that's why I believe so much in earth medicine. It's really not an alternative. It's been here since the beginning of time. It's been here longer than westernized or allopathic medicine. Um, and I think the music that I write is just a reminder of that all that we need in order to heal is here. And we have these gifts, they're God-given, they're part of the earth, and all we need to do is use them in a resourceful way, not overuse them or abuse them.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and so that we use them in balance. This is the reflection of that. I worked in Indian health for a time, and it took me a while to get used to that terminology. I was trained to think Native American, but it doesn't really reflect what the community of people feel, and so, I had to think about it in terms of why would they accept this white gal? My skin's about as white gets. And these folks so often were from families that were disenfranchised. They didn't know their own histories. And, when I looked at my own history of the Irish culture and the reliance in that country on herbal healing and on natural approaches to healing, it paralleled with what was happening in this country with Indian folks. And so
Absolutely.
we were speaking the same language.
Wow.
Absolutely.
And
so then it gave me the confidence I needed to be able to say, okay, we're different, but yet we're very alike. And so it's more important that we focus on how we're alike than how we're different. This other CD that I have here is Angelic Awakenings. Now, this one came about for two different reasons. One is I have written some books in the past, and at this point in time, I was helping a woman publish her book that she simply called Angelic Awakenings. She was 38 years old and had a massive stroke on a chiropractic table. And she was expected to die. She was on life support. When they removed the life support, she didn't die. And she, changed dramatically. She had been an engineer in a corporation that I won't name the name, but a very high-powered corporation. And she was very driven and, just very tightly wound. After she had this stroke, she changed dramatically, and her brain changed in such a way that now she was a very creative individual, and she started to write about her experiences. And she believed that she received the writings through communications when her angels would come visit her. Wow. And that's how the book came to be. Okay, so that's the one piece of this story. The second piece is that my own family experienced tragedy when my 17-year-old niece was killed in a car accident. And she was like a daughter to me. I was very close with her and my sister. And she was just a wonderful, young woman who was on her way to college. And she and her best friend were killed in this car accident. And yeah, it was a horrible thing to have happen. And my family's not ever really been the same as a result of it. But, a couple of years prior to that, my father had passed away. He was a mentor to me in many ways, but he was also the glue in the family in a lot of ways too. Just had this very calming nature. And then shortly after my niece was killed, my mother passed away. And so I had all of these multiple losses, and, I had to find a way to heal from them. And I received my music through what maybe is my angelic connection, and so sort of in complement to her book, but also in a way to express my own grief and loss, I created Angelic Awakenings. I was very fortunate. I got to work with some really terrific people. Gary Lioza, who is the sound engineer for the band Styx, who's sadly now passed away. He was the sound engineer on this project. Sandy Haynes was my vocalist. And I had a wonderful musical arranger who allowed me to say, I hear this sound here, I hear this instrument here, and produce it with him. And so I got to direct and produce it through him. So anyway, that's some of that intuitive music that's from, and it has guided imagery in it.
Yes.
It brings people on a journey to induce relaxation and self-hypnosis. And so it's both music and self-hypnosis guided imagery that's on that CD.
I can't wait.
Yeah. So anyway, I think, we're on the same path here, Keith. Gosh, we share a lot in terms of this mindful intention to promote universality, acceptance, and to connect in love, to bring that harmony and oneness through the music. Absolutely.
It's a big deal to me. I mean, it has been. I guess I was raised around music.
Yep, and your
family is just, you wound up growing up crazy, I guess. It's really crazy.
It's like when you grow up in a city, like Baltimore or Chicago, there's just a lot that you're exposed to. And, it's strange, even now there's certain limits in the neighborhoods, it's still like segregated in some ways by neighborhoods. When I moved out west, you don't see as much of that. People live together a little differently. And not that it's all the same. Yeah, things do change. They do improve. It's more integrated now, in Chicago than it was when I grew up, which is a good thing, so. Well, the other thing I've learned in working with different cultures and different communities of people, is that we don't all share the same concept of time. Even though we have a westernized view that's very discrete, how we separate out time frames. The earth doesn't move in that same time frame, and we don't heal in that same way.
Right.
And so that's part of the message of my music too, is that we need to kind of move with the earth in its own time frame to be able to heal and to be able to allow ourselves that seasonal healing.
We ought to be mindful too, though, watchful, because I sometimes hear different movement in music, the way what song is getting ready to be popular, or what song is going to begin charting, because of the things that are happening in our environment. A lot of us don't even realize what's happening in our environment, and the music reflects that, or is giving us the message, or telling us how to go about it, and we're just oblivious to what's going on around us.
Yeah, I think, people get in their own little worlds, and in some ways, social media is an interesting thing, because people can create an image of whatever they want to be and whoever they want to look like, which may or may not be real. And so it's interesting times for that reason too, and people can kind of just become very isolated. So the bigger the world has come, the higher the degree of isolation and loneliness.
Wow.
Yeah, and so this is another reason why music is so important. And I love this quote, Stevie Wonder, music is the most integrated thing we have. And so it really is a way to unite us.
Yes. It can say the things that we won't say.
Yeah, that's right. And whether it's politically correct or not, sometimes hip hop goes beyond that, which is also a good thing. Sometimes we have to mix it up and say things that people don't want to hear, so that we get them thinking and talking. But it's like, yeah, yeah. And so I think part of our vision here is that we want to blend these different philosophies, that the healing is by the universality of bringing together the Eastern influences, the 4 directions of the medicine wheel that, is part of the Indian culture, the African beliefs, the whole world spirituality. It's interesting, the conflict between the metaphysical community and the Indian community, and feeling that in some ways they're taking from their culture. So we want to be sensitive to not ever do that, to be respectful, and to appreciate each of these contributions and what the cultures represent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's the power is not only, in the words, because music is very symbolic, like we said, it's that internal process. And we relate to ourselves and we relate to each other through the movement of the music. And it's the sound, but it's also the words, and the lyrics evoke memories. We align with it symbolically because we have an internal, perception. And mine is different than yours, but sometimes we can be lucky and connect to one another and share that through communication, and it's not always communication through words. So, music can be this thread that brings that culture together and either adorns it or celebrates it, or it can bind it, and so we want it to be able to transcend, to be able to rise above any kind of oppression that, people feel in different ways today.
We want people to join us in our fight to promote and push message music so that it can be heard. We can, I feel you through your music. I don't have to know you. We're thousands of miles apart, but I know that I love you. I feel you just because of the emotional waves, the frequencies that are here. We just connect.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing, and I love your loving spirit like that. Not everybody will say that openly, because they get very concerned about, how's that going to be received, how that's going to be interpreted. But I understand what you're saying here. We need to be more loving and accepting of one another and to join together in that way.
Yeah, I don't know why it would be a problem, though. I mean, there's a lot of folks who talk about Christianity and preach the Bible and all that, and they say you got to hear the word of God and all that. What it is the vibration of you speaking this word. The first you speak it, and it's closest to your ear. So, of course, you internalize it. And folks are not really understanding, that type of thing. So,
Well, and the message is love. I was raised in the Catholic Church, and the definition of Catholicism, when you break it down, is universal love.
Universal love.
Yeah. And that's what we're saying here. And that music is powerful in that way because it empowers us to feel that love. It's not only in the words, it's in the meaning of those words. So it's that meta communication. It's within the culture. It's in the context of what's happening around us in the culture. And it also allows us to, extend out into understanding other people's culture. It's a very eclectic kind of format.
I like the way music, message music, actually music in general, but I want to stay, message music. I like how it, you ever see a child, a child who maybe has, somewhat of a learning disability, we call them retarded or whatever, but you can put the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they begin to learn these things because of the frequency or the rhythm. And that's a way of reaching folks. We can teach, train, and minister to folks, help folks become healed through music. It's about the frequency that they hear, I believe.
Well, part of my work too is I've worked with developmentally delayed and people with learning disabilities. And, we all have disabilities, honestly. Some people's are just more visible than others. Yeah. And, and so the labels we use sometimes aren't always kind, but, more importantly, we want to understand that there are strengths in each of us. And that music transcends those differences, as we've talked about here today. And many people who are extremely talented musicians actually may be dyslexic or have learning disabilities that they don't show up in a learning environment, an academic environment as a strength, because we criticize and we look at them as if that's a disability, rather than looking at what are their abilities rather than their disabilities, and so, music is one way where somebody can shine. And that's why it's so sad when the academic environments remove those programs, because maybe that's a place where a kid who's truly gifted can, rise to the top. Maybe can't, or she can't academically, but they can in terms of that creative gift, that ability, Yeah. So anyway, I think we've clearly stated here it's message music's not defined by one genre. It's found across all kinds of the space and time continuums. It's a voice of healing. It's supportive. It's empowering. It's a place that we can go, and it communicates the ministry of healing our communities locally and globally. And the message is in the music, and by putting a label on it and creating it as its own genre, we're just acknowledging the movement to collectively unite, empower, and support universal healing. And I like to think of it as a conduit that we just are going to call message music.
Absolutely. Let's support message music. Let's support message music. That's all I can.
That's it. That's what we're saying here today. And it has the ability to help us heal individually, heal our families, heal collectively. We can work together to heal ourselves. And, message music really is the intention there, that it's expressing that intention to heal. We're all, like you said, too, earlier, that we're all in need of healing physically, mentally, emotionally, socially. And that the integration of music, and that intentional healing can be advanced through message music, can unite us. Yeah. So I think the other thing is that message music represents cultural change that is occurring. We are living in a more global world. It helps us to, go beyond socially driven limitations we've talked about quite a bit here now. And I love what Denny Jenkins says. You know, he reminds us that we're more alike than we are different.
Yes.
And I think there's just multiple examples of that we've already talked about at length here today.
Yeah, you know, I enjoy working with Denny Jenkins and Michael. They're different in that their music is not typical. You know, it reminds me of the Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yep.
That's where I came from. But ironically, a lot of the music flat out speaks what I believe or what I teach and share in Christendom, Catholicism, or whatever. It's the universal message. And folks are just so enamored with their costume and their presentation and at some point they go, you know what? I think I might want to change the way I'm thinking a little bit today because I think I may have heard something in that music.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most enjoyable concerts I ever went to, and, you know, I started to count up how many concerts I have attended in a lifetime. And fortunately, we grew up in a time when concerts were affordable, you know,
Yeah.
and so I went to a couple of hundred at least, but one of them that is definitely at the top of my list was Earth, Wind, and Fire because of not only the musicianship, but the ability to entertain and move an audience, you know,
Absolutely.
and to make you just kind of feel emotion at that higher level of joy, just to feel that joy, you know. And I think Denny and Michael do that as well. And people want to be a part of that. You know, they want to experience that. And, you know, what other, you know, gift has God given us than to feel joy in our brain? I mean, that's just a wonderful thing. And so that's the reason, too, I want to work with them, because I think they can take the lyrics that I have and the messages that I'm trying to communicate and put it to music in a way that's going to make people feel it. They're going to move people with that music and with those lyrics. And so that'll be a fun thing to look forward to. And hopefully we'll share that.
Joining our motif, our ideal of To Save Souls Records message.
Mm-hmm.
We're more than music. We're a movement.
Absolutely. And that's what I see through my Coaching Choice College, through all of my work I do as a psychologist and drug and alcohol counselor, and as a coach. It doesn't really matter, you know, what modality I'm working in. The thread is always going to be a focus on wellness and healing. And music is, like you said, one of the tools. It's one of the vehicles in which we can heal our brains, and we can get to a place where we, you know, can feel the joy in life again. And I found this quote, and I just think it's a good place for us to kind of bring it to an end here today for our discussion, from Bobby McFerrin. You know, and he says, "I think we listen to music because we want to be changed. Music is not solely for our entertainment. Music has such tremendous power to bring joy. To me, that's our job as artists. Not happiness, not a groove, whatever. You must bring joy. I think that's the assignment. I have no doubt about it." You know, and I think that really says what we're trying to do here, Keith. You know, I think that's our mission.
Sign me up.
Sign me up too. And anybody else who's ready to receive it, you know, the vision of message music. Keith, thank you so much for joining me today. And I really am so happy that we found each other and that we're on this shared vision path.
Thank you for having me.
And I think that there are a lot more adventures to come, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're going to be together for a long time.
Yep. Well, you have a beautiful day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. God bless.
God bless you too. Take care now.
So long.